You're listening to the weekly Dartscast. 180!
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast. Alex Moss here, back as always with Darts statistician and a man who was 7 legs away from making his return to Twitter at the weekend. Burton, DeWitt, how are you doing?
Yeah, we'll get to that later, but I'm doing fine. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well, thank you. Episode 170, the big fish, and when we say the big fish, we're talking big guests as well. We've got the newly crowned World Grand Prix champion Gerwyn Price calling in, the world champion Peter Wright ahead of the Premier League playoffs this week. He's calling in, and you're also going to hear from the winner of the Challenge Tour at the weekend, Dave Evans. 3 great guests coming up, but we've not got time to waste here. Let's get into our chat. Looking back at the World Grand Prix, Gerwyn Price, the new champion, and he moves up to a career high of number 2 in the world on current form. Is he the one to watch in that race to be number 1 at the start of 2021?
The one thing that was really missing from his CV was a set play title, because he hadn't won. Well, I mean, there's many things missing from his CV, but the glaring thing was set play. Because if you look, the Grand Slam, which he's won the last 2 years, that's a leg play tournament. The World Series final, which he won earlier this year, leg play tournament. All of his other titles, including on the European Tour, Players Championship events, are leg play. The 2 big events that are set play are the World Grand Prix and the World Championship. He hadn't won either of those, but he did have his best ever run in the World Championship, his first ever even good run this past year, making it all the way to the semifinals before going out to the world champion in that round. He did have a quarterfinal a couple of years ago in the World Grand Prix, but that had been it. This past week, he showed that not just that he could get the set play format right, but that he could get his timing perfect in it. Because up until the penultimate set of the final, he had won every single last leg in a set that went 5 legs. He did get a little fortunate against Dave Chisnell, with Chizzy missing those 3 match starts, but you have to get fortunate at some point. Most of the time, it was the fact that his timing was perfect. And that's what it has to be. And if he's going to be world number 1, his timing at the World Championship has to be perfect, because that is by far the most important tournament, with $500,000 on the line to the winner. It's a 3-horse race right now for number 1, and it's very difficult to split them when you take off Michael van Gerwen's money that he'll be defending at the World Championship in a couple months' time. And of those 3, I think you have to say Gerwyn Price is playing the best. Does that make him the favorite? I don't know, because he's still not done it at the World Championship. He's still not gotten over the line in the most important match, but he's also never been as good as he is right now. So I'm going to say yes, but it is very tight. But yeah, I think he is the one to watch.
It is such an interesting conversation at the moment, that race to be world number 1 after the upcoming World Championship. And we spoke about this after the World Series finals. Okay, it was an unranked event, but for Gerwyn Price, that was his 3rd title in a week. He's now won 4 of the last 5. I think it's something like 22 wins out of the last 23 games that he's played. So he's in some excellent form, and we spoke a month ago about it. One of the issues really with Gerwyn Price was, well, he's got to defend that Grand Slam title. Peter Wright, I was tipping him to maybe do it. He hasn't got to defend any major win from that time 2 years ago. Obviously, Michael van Gerwen's got to defend that £500,000 for winning the World Championship 2 years ago. But Gerwyn Price has just basically wiped that off, that Grand Slam, because he's won the World Grand Prix. So he's going into this Grand Slam essentially with a free hit, really. He hasn't got to defend all that money, because in a way he's kind of done it this week by winning that World Grand Prix title. So I think he's put himself firmly in the conversation. I'd have probably put him 3rd out of those 3 players a month ago, even though he won those 3 titles. But considering all that we know at the moment and the form that Gerwyn Price is in, and you made a good point, I had it down here on my notes as well, don't underestimate how important it was for him to win a set play title going into the World Championship. And as you say, the last leg deciders, he was till the final, he was 10 out of 10, ended up being 11 out of 12, that final set, coming from 2-0 down to win 3-2. He's getting the right shots at the right moments, as a certain world number 1 at the moment likes to say. So he's, in terms of timing, he's getting that into his game as well, and he is one of the top players in the world, up to number 2 now. If he can carry on the form he's going, if he can have another good run in the Grand Slam, the European Championship, Players Championship finals, and continue this form going into the World Championship, if it's at Ali Pali or somewhere else, I think he is really going to fancy that job. And he said it in countless interviews now. He wants to get to that number 1 spot. He's only got 1 more place to go. I think he is a genuine contender right now. And I think between those 3, I don't know if any bookmakers are doing the book line for it at the moment, but it's got to be such a tight one to call at the moment.
Yes, indeed. And Of course, talking about Gerwyn Price, we've talked a lot about him recently because of how great he has been. So we haven't talked nearly as much about the man he beat in the final, Dirk Vendaivamboda. But what a brilliant week it was, reaching his first TV final and opening up a lot of doors for him now getting into the Grand Slam. Do you think, though, this will be a one-off, or can you see him challenging long-term?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and you haven't heard the chat that I just had with Gerwyn Price before we started recording, but I mentioned about Dirk and who he ended up playing in the final, and he wasn't quite sure whether it'd be his lot that would be the one final he gets to, or if this will be a sustained challenge for these big titles. And one of the things he mentioned was the crowd. There wasn't a crowd, of course, for the World Grand Prix, and we're hoping, okay, maybe not in the next few months. We know a lot of these events, big events, are going to be behind closed doors, but going forward into next year, we will have the fans back, and whether he is able to produce that level in front of a crowd, and that is going to be one of the question marks. Probably why I'm not going to say for definite that he's going to do it, but you've got to give him every credit for what he was able to produce. And going into every game in the tournament, he was the underdog. Even that first round, okay, it was an awful game against Mensah Suljovic, came through that in a final set. But the World Grand Prix is one of those tournaments that, given the short format in that first round, if you can get through that, then you've got a bit more breathing space for the next few rounds. And Hiller took a lot of confidence getting that win on TV, even though the performance wasn't anywhere near the level that we saw for the rest of the tournament. But he was able to put out some top quality players, Dimitri Van den Berg, Gary Anderson, Simon Whitlock as well in that semi-final. We saw Simon maybe slow things down a little bit and try and play some mind games with him. Okay, it worked for a set, but after that, Dirk was superb, and the final was just one step too far. But he's the fifth Dutchman to reach a PDC TV ranking final. Roland Scholten, Raymond van Barneveld, Vincent van der Voort, Michael van Gogh. He's in some elite company. Now it's a case of whether he can keep it going. And as we know from his interviews, he works on an aubergine farm. He wants to carry on working and have the darts as well. Some players, it works for them. They can keep that work-darts balance. Some people put the work to one side, focus on darts, and it works completely, and they carry on and keep pushing. Some people, we've seen Darren Webster's a key example, sacks off the work, and his game's dropped since then. So if he can keep the right balance, and when the crowds do come back, he continues to that level, then sure, I think he could be one to watch.
Yeah, it's a tough one to say because it did come out of the blue. We've seen players have sustained form and have a big breakthrough, and it's a lot easier to judge whether we think it's just they've hit a purple patch or it's whether there's something they can sustain. For Dirk Vendaivamboda, he really hadn't done much in the last 6 months. And I said on the show, I think I said on the show last week, maybe it was during our midweek episode, but on one of the two, that the timing seemed a bit off for him. If this event was happening back in February and March when he was playing brilliantly, I could have seen a big run from him. But we didn't really see that from him in the summer series or the autumn series. He was one of the players who it seemed more like the break did him a disservice compared to a service. But boy, did he prove me wrong this past week, because the first match aside, he did up his game, and he did play better than we've ever seen from him on TV, nearing those levels that he was putting in at the beginning of the year when he was looking a top 32 player. And, if you look for the season, he's still top 32 in the Players' Championship events in terms of overall average, up at number 25, even ahead of players such as Mensah Suljovic, who he beat in the first round, who has a title this year in the Players' Championship events. He's reached a final this year, I should say, in the Players' Championship events. So he's been playing at a very good standard throughout the year, even though he's dropped off. That bodes well now that he should have his confidence back. But we do need to see. This was his first TV appearance outside of the World Championships. So he doesn't have that experience. And whether this was just a great week for him or whether this is the beginning of something, we don't yet know. If he can get to that level he was playing at in February or March, I think it is the beginning of something, because he was looking a legitimate challenger back then. He hasn't since then until now. I want to see how he kicks on from here, but it absolutely can be, because the game we've seen from him in glimpses earlier this year is good enough.
Now we'll move on to our first guest on this week's show, and it is with the newly crowned World Grand Prix champion, Gerwyn Price.
I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the newly crowned World Grand Prix champion, Gerwyn Price. Thanks for your time, Gerwyn. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm glad to be home, to be honest with you. It's been a long, tough week.
Well, a long, tough week, which finishes with a title. Congratulations on the win last night. We saw what it meant to you when the winning double went in. How good does it feel to be a World Grand Prix champion and now a three-time TV ranking title winner as well?
Yeah, obviously I'm over the moon. It's difficult sometimes travelling week in, week out, leaving your family behind. But and on days like that when you're picking up trophies and picking up some good ranking points and some good prize money, yeah, it certainly makes it well worth it.
We last had you on the show for our 100th episode way back in April 2019. Since then, you've retained the Grand Slam. Of course, you've won the World Grand Prix, all 3 titles in different circumstances. The first Grand Slam with the crowd, the second Grand Slam, the crowd. You won them back over, and the third with no crowd. How do they all compare?
Yeah, obviously I like the crowds when they're there, but sometimes they can get a little bit too much for me. But I've learned to deal with those situations, and hopefully now after this lockdown, people can sort of realise that I don't just play my game to try and put people off. The way I play is to make me play better, and hopefully they just give me the benefit of the doubt and ease off me a little bit, because it shows that when I haven't got those extra pressures and the people are putting me off, then I can pick up major titles and some other titles as well.
Definitely, and we spoke to Nathan Aspinall after the league phase of the Premier League finished, and he said he felt it was him and yourself that missed the crowd the most. Would you agree with that? Was it hard to go on the stage with no fans?
Yeah, obviously it's difficult, but believe it or not, I play better with a crowd than I do without them, even though they are on my back and they can be off-putting. I know that's what makes majors, and that's what makes major winners, is being able to play under that pressure, under that intensity, and with the crowd and all the atmosphere and everything together. And yeah, I'm the same as every other player. I think we're all missing the crowd, very much, and hopefully they'll be back soon.
Since the Premier League, you've been in some excellent form. You won a couple of events of the Autumn Series, the World Series finals, now the World Grand Prix, and it's been a little bit strange, I suppose. You've had fans for some of those events and you've not had fans for the World Grand Prix. Was it difficult adjusting between the two like that?
No, not really. You sort of know what to expect when crowds are there, so it's just going back to the norm, so to speak. And then we've playing in pro tours without crowds week in, week out, so it's a similar scenario really, from going in from pro tours to Europeans to TV majors. I think we're all pretty used to having it with and without crowds.
You've said before in interviews as well, the double start format for the World Grand Prix, you're not the biggest fan of it, but now you've won the title. Looking back, was there a point during the tournament you felt like you'd got to grips with it and you could go on and win it?
Yeah, obviously it's just getting through that first game, and the first game's always the hardest one. And having come in through that one against Wadamena, I felt comfortable then. I didn't play particularly well in that one, but I think after the Kim Ibrex game, I thought, I was finding my doubles a bit better. I was scoring well, and I was taking opportunities. But it's still difficult. Every game is different, and you never really know if you're going to get off first, second, third dart, or if you're going to bomb opportunities. And I did bomb opportunities in most of the games. Luckily, it didn't cause me upsets.
One of the key factors to your win at the week has got to be last set deciders. You won the first 10 of those sets that went to a decider, and probably none more important than the last set against Dave Chisnell in the semi-finals, him missing those 3-match darts. What's going through your head when he's stepping up for that double and you could be heading home?
Yeah, obviously I was practically, case was practically, I was on the way home, but it's never over until that final double goes in, and I know Chizzy had a lot of luck in 2 other games, and I knew that he'd missed a lot of doubles against Joe Gunn, so although I thought that it was more than likely over, it was always that chance that he could miss, and he did. But I still had to take my opportunity just to step up and hit the double 16, going for a big 16, and actually left my favourite double on the board, which is double 12. So it's a blend of the skies really, and a little bit lucky, so...
Touching on the final from last night, you got off to a good start, 2-0 up in sets, 4-1 up. Dirk then starts to come back, 4-2. He goes 2-0 up in the next set, and you run off 3 legs in a row to win 5-2. Is that a sign of your determination that you're not going to give sets up or give up at any point in the game, that you can come back from 2-0 and go on and win the title?
Yeah, I've done it in pro tours. I've done it. I think the last pro tour I won in the Autumn Series was against. No, sorry, the one before I won against Devin Peterson. I was 7-4 down first away. I got 4 legs off and won that game. And I think a couple of games in that day I was down as well. 3-0 to Van der Voort, crack 1-6-3. Same again against Daniel, but I was 3-0 down, come back and won that game. So I had been behind in games before, and I know what it takes to win. And that's just upping your game and putting them under pressure. And I think that's what I did against Dirk in that set. But I still had to finish it off that 102. I think if that didn't go in, he's got a stat on 64 and he was playing well enough just to pop that and put me under pressure again.
We saw on Twitter as well today you were complimentary on Dirk and his run to the final. Do you see any of yourself in Dirk when you made that breakthrough run at the World Match Play in that UK Open final a few years ago?
Yeah, obviously everyone's got to start somewhere. You know, he's had his pro card before, but he had to go back and get it this year in January. So fair play to him. He's dug deep. He got his pro card back, and he's had a fantastic run this year, well, especially towards the end of the year. You know, I think, to be honest with you, I think this sort of format, I'm not sure he would have been the same player had it been a crowd. There's a difference between playing in front of a crowd in majors and major finals, semi-finals, than it is being behind closed doors. So, you know, I know Dick's a great player and he does well on pro tours, but this not doing it on the big stage when there's big crowds there. Yeah, he's got the final. This is one, but it's going to be tough for him, I think, to back it up.
Probably not seen it, but the top line on your Wikipedia page at the moment describes you as a Welsh darting legend that warmed up with rugby back in the day. Have you got any more sports in your locker, or do you think darts will be the last one?
I don't know. I put my hand to snooker now and again, so you never know if I get more in darts and I spark up and have a blast on the table.
Brilliant. Just two more before we let you go, and it's a busy schedule. Two more European tours over the next 2 weekends, then the European Championship. How are you feeling about all the travelling? We've just seen two of the players from last week test positive and had to be pulled out of the World Grand Prix. How important is it to make sure that you're being as safe as possible at the moment?
You know, I stick around the house with the family. Me and my missus will just go, you know, to the supermarket if need be, and we're always got our face masks on and sticking to the rules and regulations or whatever the government set out. You know, the kids that go to school, and you know, we're always doing what we need to keep everybody safe. And hopefully, you know, if we keep doing that, then every time I go into these tournaments and getting tested, then I'm going to get that negative result back. Well, positive but negative, you know.
Excellent. Well, lastly, the World Cup in a few weeks. Yourself and Johnny Clayton for a third year together. He's been in some good form like yourself the last few weeks. So you feel like you two could potentially go all the way, bring back that title to Wales?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm in good form. Johnny is coming back to some good form as well. We got to the European final 2 weeks ago. But every dart match is on the day. But I'm sure Johnny playing with me and me playing with Johnny, we can boost each other. About the final of the prize. So he hasn't yet, so hopefully we can get together.
Well, always appreciate your time going, and congratulations again on the title, the World Grand Prix, and wish you all the best for the weeks coming up as well.
No worries, appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Thanks again to Gerwyn for joining us. Now let's get into our picks for the Premier League finals night. Yes, this season finally comes to an end behind closed doors at the Ricoh Arena in Coventry. We're going to make our picks. Of course, we better go through some picks that we've had recently, and we ran the Premier League Prediction League. We already know the winner of that. Glenn Sport News has won the signed set of Michael van Gogh in darts, but in the battle of the co-hosts, it's all to play for going into this final round. 12 points possible. I'm currently winning 61 to 55 after failing to put in any picks on the final league night. So let's get into it then. First game of the night, Glenn Durant against Gary Anderson. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, amazing that you failed to put in your picks and I still only picked up 1 point on you. That's Glenn definitely should be coming into this with a bit of confidence, despite the fact that he played poorly in the World Grand Prix, because he has to just, you know, he can write that off as being, what could have I done? Yeah, I played poorly, but I could have played the best I could have played, and I still was probably losing that match because of how well Dave Chisnell played. So it's an easy match to write off. And Glenn Durant before that had been having, you know, a very good year, continuing his run of reaching semifinals and stuff. Well, here he is in a semifinal again, but he'll be going in as the man to beat. He topped the table. He was only the third person to ever do that, and he's looked just that little bit better in the Premier League than he has elsewhere. And it's not that he hasn't looked good elsewhere. I think that will make the difference in this match. I think Glenn Durant is going to finally break through and reach a PDC final, get himself into the Grand Slam of darts, and, you know, beating a two-time world champion and former two-time Premier League champion is not a bad way to do it. So I'm going to go Glenn Durant to get over the line 10 legs to 8.
Well, I was hoping I was going to do some picks opposite to you to give you every chance of clawing back that 6-point deficit. But on my piece of paper here, I did have Glen Durant to win this game 10-8, would you believe it? But I'll make it a little bit more close then. I'll go 10-9 to Glen Durant. And it's such a hard night to call, isn't it? Because all these four players, aside from Gary Anderson, got to the quarterfinals, but he had a disappointing defeat in that round. All the other three players went out first round of the World Grand Prix, so they've had a little bit of time to mull over those defeats. And since the league phase finished back in, was it early September, I think, you could have probably made a case for all of these players maybe being the favourite on current form. They've all produced some good darts over the last 6-7 weeks, but going into this, it's such a difficult one to call. But you went for 10-8. I'll make it a little bit closer, then I'm going to change my pick to 10-9.
The second match of the night, Peter Wright, the world champion, finishing second in the table, just a point off Glen Durant, going against Nathan Aspinall, who finished third on debut. How do you see this one?
Yeah, you can hear from Peter Wright in a moment. I had a chat with him during, I suppose, the virtual Premier League media day ahead of the finals on Thursday, and he fancies himself to win the title. He's always very confident in his chances, and it's kind of like this is a big opportunity for him to win this Premier League title. He's trying to tick off the big titles, the World Championship, the World Cup, and this is the biggest one after the World Championship in terms of prize money. 3 years ago, he should have won it against Michael van Gerwen. He's not in the field for this final tonight, so I think he's got to make the most of the chance. I'm going to go 10-7 to the world champion, and I'm going to use my joker for this game as well.
I forgot that we could do a joker. I was going to go the world champion as well, but I need to make up ground. So this is where I'm going to take my stab. I'm going to make my move. I'm going to close the gap by getting 6 points on this match. I'm also going to joker it, but I'm going to joker the other way. I'm going to go Nathan Aspinall, not for any reason other than I want to win this competition. And the best way I can is to just use the fact that I'm picking second in this match to my advantage. So I'm going to go Nathan Aspinall. I'll make it a pair of 10-8s. I think it'll be a final between two debutants in the Premier League. Who would have thought that 8 months ago?
Very exciting. Well, we'll tweet our picks for the final when either of us, if we get them right or get them wrong, we'll tweet what we think is going to happen in the final. And yourself, Burton, you've been in some great form with the picks that we've been doing, courtesy of our sponsor, Low 6. 5-4 to you in the picks for the second round of the World Grand Prix that we did on our last episode. You also tipped Gerwyn Price to win the title on our preview show as well. And I'm sure we'll have some contests with the Premier League and the European Tour coming up this weekend. So make sure you download the Low 6 app. 18 plus, UK residents only, T&Cs apply. Please gamble responsibly. BeGambleAware.org, and best of luck if you're playing along.
Now, Peter Wright withdraws from the next two European Tour events and the World Cup title defense next month, as you will hear from him in a second after we discuss this. How surprised are you, though, since Gary Anderson had previously pulled out, that neither of the World Cup champions from last year on Team Scotland will be there defending the title?
I've got to say, when Peter told me the news when I spoke to him earlier today, and you'll hear it in the interview, I was right. Okay, I couldn't believe it. I was a little bit surprised because I know how much the World Cup, I know it means a lot to Gary Anderson, also means a lot to Peter Wright as well, to play for Scotland, represent his country and all of that. It's a big event for a lot of players. Gary Anderson, we probably knew this was going to happen because he skipped the Autumn Series in Germany, skipped the World Series finals in Austria. So we kind of know that at the minute he's not a big fan of the travelling. But for Peter Wright, a player that plays in virtually every event that there is on the calendar, Players' Championships, European Tour events, it was a little bit surprising. But listening to him explain his reasons as well, and we touched on it on our last show, the 2 positive tests for COVID that we had with Adrian Lewis and Stephen Bunting, and he said he felt maybe they caught the virus when they were in Germany for the European Tour event a week or so earlier, be it when they went, I think it was on the minibus from the airport or at an airport. It's strange times, and when you see 2 players having to withdraw from the event that they've qualified for because they've tested positive, they don't have the symptoms as well, it does make the players think. So maybe we see this happen with other players, I'm not so sure. But I think it is something that all these players will be thinking about, given what is at stake over the next few months. There's a lot of big events coming up, a lot of big ranking events coming up, and we know the World Cup's not a ranked event. Maybe it's one of those things where you've got to weigh up all the decisions, all the events that are coming up, all the travelling that's involved, and that's one that's fallen by the wayside, unfortunately. So it is a shame that we're not going to see Gary and Peter represent Scotland again, try and defend that title, which they won over a year ago now in Germany. But safety comes first for these players, and when you've got a lot of money up for grabs, the World Championship at the end of the year, they'll want a slice of it. They won't want to have to pull out of these events due to having the virus that they've picked up, maybe abroad or via travelling or whatever means. So it's it's a shame, but I can understand his reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And if you had told me 9 months ago that neither Gary Anderson nor Peter Wright were there to defend their World Cup championship, I would have not believed. Well, I would have thought, okay, so Peter Wright must be injured, and Gary Anderson just decided to skip it because Gary Anderson does skip events. And you tell me now it's really not that surprising, and it might not be the last player to do that. You might hear other players decide, especially players who year in, year out represent their country in the World Cup, decide it's just not worth it to go and compete in this event. That said, Peter Wright pulling out of the European Tour events is the bigger story, because you can figure out some way to travel to these and minimize your risk. And there is a lot of ranking money on the line in those events. And that does matter as Peter Wright pushes towards world number one. But as you also said, the £500,000 at the end of the year, the World Championship, is the big prize. And making sure that you're in the best shape you can be, both in terms of health, but as well as in terms of form for that, is what's most important. Not just because Peter Wright's trying to defend his world title, but because that's where world number one is going to be won and lost, most likely at least. The fact that, okay, he could have won one of these European Tour events and got £25,000, yeah, it could end up making a difference if both he and Michael van Gerwen go out early in the World Championship. But, if you become world number one going on in the second round of the World Championship, that's really not what Peter Wright wants. Peter Wright wants to be world number one because he's won the world title again. And that's what matters. So I think the decision makes sense. It is still surprising, though not as surprising as it would have been 9 months ago. You can't say it's the wrong decision. No player deciding not to travel to an event right now would be the wrong decision. You have to decide what is best for you and your family. And right now for Peter Wright, traveling to Europe, it seems like that's not what's right for him.
Well, let's hear from the man himself then. Here's our chat with the reigning world champion looking to add the Premier League title to his CV this week. Here's our chat with Peter Wright. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the reigning champion of the world, Peter Wright. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. Well, a little bit disappointed after the Grand Prix, but, just get on with the next one, and obviously that's a Premier League coming up. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, we last spoke at the Premier League Media Day in Aberdeen way back in February. What a strange 8 months it's been since, from the euphoria of that welcome that you had from that Aberdeen crowd that night to the break. No crowds. How have you found it all?
Personally, I found it's quite difficult because, I like the crowd there. It makes me play better. With the adrenaline, you get butterflies when you go up waiting to go on stage and for your walk on and having the roar and everything. It's and I don't get that with these behind closed doors TV events, which is a shame. At the moment we've got to deal with that and just get used to it until we can have the crowds back in.
Going back to that time, a couple of days after the UK Open, you of course turned 50. Did you manage to get in any celebrations before the lockdown and everything shut down?
Yeah, we did. I had a few friends around. Let's have 6 friends around. That was it. And we had a good time.
Excellent. Well, for pretty much all the players, when the lockdown came, it meant practicing at home on their own. But yourself, you had a lodger in Dimitri Vandenberg. How did that come about, him staying with you and not going back home?
Well, it's only down to the person who had already offered to put him up, that fell through. And we was at a Players' Championships at the weekend, and we said we give him the option. You're quite welcome to come and stay with us, and just see how it goes. See how long you be here or not. If it's a month or a week or whatever. It's fine with us. So it ended up being 3 months, about 2 days off 3 months, I think it was.
So the world champion and the world youth champion living together, did that change how much you practiced? Obviously back then you didn't know when the tour was going to return, but did you and Dimitri make the most of getting to practice together?
Not really. We sort of practiced. But with me, I like to do my own thing and have to give myself own confidence on the board and stuff like that. But when we did practice together, I just brought him back down just to doing simple stuff like simple stuff I do, instead of just going up playing really hard games and stupid games that you get annoyed with because you're not hitting the stuff, and just brought him back to basics, just hitting simple stuff and just making him think that way. And I think it helped him a little bit. So, and then a couple of times we'd have legs against each other, first one at 6 and stuff like that, just to see where each other's game was. And it turned all right for him, didn't it?
That's right, yeah, the World Match Play picked that title up. That was, of course, the first TV event back, obviously behind closed doors and away from Blackpool. I've got to ask about your first round game that you had with Jose. 8-6 down, you take off the glasses, you win 10-8. Is that where I've been going wrong, playing with glasses?
It worked on the floor tournaments. I tried them, won the Players' Championships on the floor and finished top at the Summer Series. And so... the work's on the floor, but I couldn't get used to the glare and everything that was coming off the glasses. That just annoyed me. But now I wear contacts, and as long as I don't put them in too early, they don't dry up on stage too much. So that's the main thing. But it's a lot better.
Good to hear. Well, the Premier League resumed with a run of nights behind closed doors as well. And we've got to mention your 9-darter against Gurney, your first on TV. You've come close on a few occasions before. How good did it feel to tick that one off the list?
Yeah, that was that's just another thing, as you say, on the list of stuff to do. And let's try and I've still got a chance to hit another one to scoop the bonus for hitting 2 in the Premier League. So. Yeah, so hopefully I'll hit one in the semis or I'll just leave it for the final.
Fingers crossed. Well, during that run of games, we had that 2 or 3 day break and you went into the final 4 games, 6th place. You'd lost your last 3 despite some big averages. How were you feeling about your chances of making the top 4 at that point?
I was playing all right, and it was just like my game was just like it wasn't consistent enough. So I had to try and brush up and be more consistent. And that was the main thing. It was like because I'd have a burst of brilliant legs and then be rubbish for 2, and that was no good. I missed some silly doubles as well because I rushed them. But to finish second and 1 point off of Glenn and one leg, if I got the win against Glenn instead of the draw, I could have been top. Distant but didn't do it.
That's right, yeah, you went a perfect 4-0, those 4 wins from the last 4 games to finish second, qualify for the playoffs this week. Many are saying it was the closest race to get in the top 4 in the history of the Premier League. You've been in it for 6 or 7 years now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. It was really, really... I think it was really good playing it day after day as well. You saw players start absolutely brilliant and then fade away a little bit and then come back a bit at the end, and then you saw some players starting bad and then playing cool at the end. That was like it was all ups and downs, and people could see that no one carried the full form on all the way through. Glenn started off fantastic, and then he dipped off at the end, and then Gary started off brilliant, and then he dipped off, and he got some strange results.
Since then, we've had the Autumn Series. You won a title there, the World Series Finals, Euro Tour, the World Grand Prix just finished as well. It's a busy schedule, and it looks like it's going to be even busier now for the rest of the year. How excited are you about what's to come for the next few months?
The next few months, tomorrow, this after the Premier League, I'm only going to play in the European Finals. I've already qualified, so it doesn't matter really where I finish. It's just I'm having the weekend off for the European, and the following European I'm having off as well because it's quite hard to get a flight back from there to Birmingham and to be ready and tested, ready to start. No, that's for the World Cup, sorry. So we struggled to get a flight back from Riesa. That was it. You'd have to fly into Heathrow, and then it's 3 hours to go home. It's just a pain in the backside. So we've decided just to keep myself fresh, ready for the finals of that, and then I'm nice and fresh for November for it's say 5 days of the Players' Championships, then the Grand Slam, and then the Players' Championships, all one after another, all in commentary, then, I should be nice and fit for that.
Fair enough. Well, in terms of prize money, the Premier League, second only to the World Championship, you've got that title on your mantelpiece. What would it mean to add the Premier League to it and be the holder of the two most lucrative titles in darts at the same time?
Obviously, I think I'm going to do it. So it'll be good. I'm looking forward to picking up the trophy.
Well, it's 3 years since your last Premier League playoff. You probably don't need reminding about that final with Van Goen, but I know it's different circumstances this week, not at the O2, no crowd. Does it feel still like there's unfinished business, though, from 2017?
Exactly. There was obviously I got to the final. The only time I've been to the final of the Worlds was 2014, and I had my chances in a few of them sets to make it a lot closer against Michael, even though I wasn't ready then. And so I learned from all these defeats and these finals and everything I've played in. I've learned all over the years, and that's why I went and won the Worlds, and I've learned all that. So, when I get to the finals of playing the Premier League, then I think I can cross that line.
And lastly, before we let you go, you mentioned there you're taking the next couple of weekends off. We've got the World Cup coming up in next month, and of course last year it was great for you winning it for the first time with Gary, but it sounds like he's not keen on the travelling outside of the UK. So are you expecting to be with maybe John Henderson, who's your partner this year?
Unfortunately, I'm not going to be playing either.
Okay.
I can understand, Gary saying why he doesn't want to travel out, getting on planes and stuff like that, and I've had a lot to think about it. That's why another reason I've pulled out of these two Europeans coming up is because of all the flying. It's not people not doing their jobs properly, anything like that. It's just a few idiots that are breaking the rules, so you could pick it up, poor Adrian Lewis and Stephen Bunting, missing out. I think they probably called that from when we was in Germany. Travelling maybe in the minibus from the airport, stuff like that, or at an airport, somewhere down that line. So unfortunately, but I've won it. I've won the World Cup with Gary. We've lost in the final a couple of times, but that's another thing ticked off. So I won't be playing in another World Cup. I've achieved my dream of winning it for Scotland, and so unfortunately I won't be playing again. Completely
understandable. Is that a decision then you've made quite recently, seeing Adrian and Stephen test positive and seeing how easily I suppose it is to maybe catch this virus, or is that something that you'd decided a little while before?
No, I've been thinking about it since I come back, and just past couple of weeks I've been asking guys, we're going to go and bend it and stuff like this, but I can see, we've won it. I've won it, and it's a dream come true to win it. And but there's you've got to think of your health and safety and your family and stuff like that. And it's the way it is at the moment, and no vaccines and stuff. So maybe when all the vaccines come in, if the World Championships are in abroad, then obviously we'll be driving. That's what we're going to do. We're going to drive to the European finals. So, and that's, just fingers crossed, things change really quickly and we can get some, stuff out to help everybody.
Definitely. Well, Peter, it's always nice to catch up with you. I do appreciate your time, and hopefully you'll have a Premier League title to add to that list of titles for the first time later this week.
Yes, I will. Cheers, Alex.
Thanks again to Peter for joining us. Now let's get into our two questions of the weekend. As it is episode 170 of the show, we've got to ask whose 170 title winning shot was the best? Ted Hankey, Colin Lloyd, or Nathan Aspinall?
Well, if you ask which is the, in terms of commentary, the best, it has to be Colin Lloyd's, because it is one of the most legendary and still played clips of commentary with Sid Waddell saying, Lloydie, my son, you've done it. But I don't know if that was the best 170 out. Well, maybe it was. It was definitely a good one. But I just got to go Hankey because it was to win the World Championship. Not just was it the first televised 170 out to win a title, or at least in a major event, the first televised 170 to win a title, but it was to win the World Championship. And okay, he was 5 sets to 2 up. It was not a close match. But the fact that he hit a 170 to win the title, I think makes it the best. So I'm going to go that one.
I sent this the tweet as well to a couple of the guys involved in the poll as well, and Colin Lloyd said me all day long. He was pretty confident he'd win the poll. Ted Hankey said all 170s to win are an achievement, but mine was to become world champion. So I think mine is the number one at the moment. And like you and like Ted, I think I've got to agree with you. And at the moment on our poll, which is running on our Twitter at Weekly Dartscast, you can all go and vote on it. It's available for the rest of the week. Ted Hankey, that 2000 Lakeside final, 40% of the vote at the moment. Nathan Aspinall winning the 2019 UK Open, his first major title, that's 33%. And Colin Lloyd at the moment just in last place, 2005 World Match Play, 27%. But yeah, like you, to win a world title, and I guess really in terms of the games, how they went, Colin Lloyd's was probably the one that was needed the most. John Part was starting to mount a little bit of a comeback. Nathan Aspinall was well in control against Rob Cross on that night, I seem to recall, and I think Ted Hankey against Roddy Baxter, that ended up being a 6-0 win in the final. So that was, again, a one-sided one. But yeah, I've got to agree, if you win a world title, to do it with a 170, that's pretty special.
I will say, though, Nathan Aspinall's the best 170 outshot to win a title that I've ever watched from an airplane. As I was flying back from the UK Open and watched the final on the airplane back. But we have 2 questions of the week, and our second one deals with the fact that the Challenge Tour just ended last week, the Development Tour a couple weeks ago, and our new tour card holders, Dave Evans, Richie Edhouse, Keen Barry, and Barry Vampire. Which of those 4 do you think will be the highest ranked after the first year, though, of their 2-year tour card?
Yeah, this is a very interesting one, and I think you could make a case for 3, possibly 4 of them doing well, and I hope they all do well. Barry Vampire, as we've spoken about on the show recently, coming back from the Dartitis and now back on the tour. Keen Barry, he's winning the vote by quite a landslide at the moment, 58%, and only 18 years old, but we've seen he almost won his tour card via the Challenge Tour instead. If he'd have finished in that top 2, he ended up finishing 3rd. Richie Edhouse, you're going to hear from him on the show next week. We've spoke to him, but we had so many guests on the show this week, we're going to hold his chat till next week, so look forward to that. Winning the title and then getting to the final to get into that top 2 was some unbelievable form on that final day. Dave Evans, who you can hear from in a moment, won 2 titles over the weekend, and kind of like an 18-year dream for him. He played in the World Masters just before he turned 13 years old, the youngest player to play in the men's event. Now he's going to be playing on the professional circuit, and we're going to get a glimpse of these players in a few weeks' time. Dave Evans has already said that he's got the invite to play in the Winter Series via the Challenge Tour Order of Merit. You'd probably expect Richie Edhouse and Keen Barry to get a call up as well, given that not all 128 players will play in those events. So, yeah, we're going to get a glimpse of them, see how they get on against these professionals. Richie Edhouse has played on the tour before. Dave Evans has played a few events as well. And Keen Barry, we all know what he can do and what he's capable of. But if I had to pick one, I'll probably go with Dave Evans on the recent experience and finishing top. I'll just give it to him. But I do think there's a case for 3, possibly 4 of them doing well.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them, as you said, you can make a good case for doing well next year. And I, through my secret Twitter that nobody knows about, did vote in this poll. And I voted for the person currently in 3rd on it, Richie Edhouse. And I think that comes down to experience at this level. You know, he's been a tour card holder before. He had a fantastic 2019 season despite not being a tour card holder, qualifying for the Players' Championship final, or nearly qualifying for the Players' Championship final, qualifying for the World Championships. He had a great year and just missed out on his tour card, and showed, especially last year, what he could do at the senior level. And, you know, he might have been one of those players that like I've said before about players, that just needed a 3-year tour card because it took him a while to learn the game. He learned it in the year he didn't have a tour card, but now he's back. I just think that experience will make that big difference his first year in. We talked about Keen Barry and Barry Vampire last week or 2 weeks ago, and I think both of them will do well. Dave Evans obviously winning 2 events over the weekend to get to the World Championship and get his tour card. Phenomenal performance for him. But I think Richie Edhouse's experience at this level will make one to beat the one who will do the best next year. So I'm going to disagree with most of the people who voted, and I'm going Richie Edhouse.
Let's hear from the winner of this year's Challenge Tour. Here's our chat with Dave Evans. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the winner of this year's Challenge Tour, Dave Evans. Thanks for the time, Dave. How you doing?
No problem. Thank you, Alex. I'm doing well. Yourself?
Doing well, thank you, and congratulations on winning your first tour card at the weekend. A couple of days have passed now. What have the last 48 hours or so been like since you found out you'd secured a top 2 finish on the Challenge Tour?
Oh, it's been absolutely mental. It's been non-stop the last couple of days, and with a load of congratulations off quite a lot of people, and doing interviews as well. So it has been manic, yeah.
We last had you on the show back in April, early on in the lockdown, and you were impressing on the Modus Online League. We just spoke to Richie Edhouse, also involved in it. Both finished in the top 2 on the Challenge Tour. How much did it help having that competitive games to play in on the stream during the lockdown?
Absolutely massive. It was one of those that playing against some of the best players in the world, it's got to do something to your game and obviously and in your head as well. So if you think you can, you're going out there on the lockdown and beating the likes of Phil Taylor, Raymond van Barneveld and people like that, and obviously Richie was in as well, and you're doing that week in, week out, then there's no reason why you can't do it on a floor tournament at the Challenge Tour. So I think it helped massively, yeah.
And you were among the 200 plus players that we saw in Barnsley at the weekend, 6 Challenge Tour events over the 3 days. What was your reaction though when the PDC announced that the Challenge Tour was coming back? So a lot of people probably didn't expect it to continue with the restrictions that we've got at the moment.
Yeah, to be fair, I was delighted with it because obviously playing with in the lockdown and things like that, yes, it has helped me massively. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if other people haven't been doing anything, then it's going to stand me in good stead because not many people are going to have the practice matches under the belt. So when it came back on, it was good to actually get back to competitive sport again, to be fair.
As we touched on, the Modus Online League, that kept you busy for a few months. But what about in the build-up to last weekend? Did you manage to get in any local comps or any practice with people in person before going to Barnsley?
Just a couple. There was a couple of local competitions that Alan Hodgson puts out. He does quite well with his company. So there was a couple of them, but it wasn't sort of massive. It was literally 30 people and that was it. It was six people in each group, so it was like a grand slam, so you got 5 games and then you carried on from there. But it was like constant rules of mask wearing and no standing up. You had to wear your mask while you were playing and things like that, so it was a lot different, but I think they helped a bit, yeah.
So I suppose that gave you a taste of what was to come this past weekend in Barnsley. What was it like going into the venue on that Friday morning? As I mentioned, 200 plus players, seeing a lot of familiar faces, some that you've probably not seen since the first Challenge Tour of the year back in January. Was it strange at first?
Yeah, it was strange because obviously these new rules, you've got to stick by them, and sometimes you've not seen someone for a long time that you don't actually know what they look like anymore. So you see them wearing a mask and all you can see is like what they used to wear, and you remember thinking, oh, well, yeah, I remember him wearing that, so that's got to be him, So there's a lot of people growing their hair and growing big beards and things like that. So yeah, but it was nice to see all the regulars again from obviously the last few years of being on the Challenge Tour. So it's good to catch up with them all, yeah.
Well, let's get on to your results from the weekend. Then the second event on the Friday, you go all the way, beating Richie Burnett 5-4 in the final, and that puts you right in contention. I think only £400 off the top 2 going into the Saturday and the Sunday. How are you feeling after that win?
After that win, ecstatic, because I thought to myself, going into the competition with 150 quid on the merit, I thought, well, just play like you can, and you'll do it. You'll try and do something. So when I won that one, it was a little bit nerve-wracking after that because I'm thinking, well, I've got to do a bit more now. But to get that first win, it was on the first day was really, really good.
On the Saturday, the second event, I've got to mention the 12 darter in the decider to beat Nathan Rafferty 5-4 in the semi-finals, a win that puts you top of the order of merit. Then you go on and win the title. You're £1,300 clear at the top. What was that Saturday night like going into that final day top?
It was so tiring. I mean, I think I went 4-1 up against Nathan Rafferty, and I was thinking to myself, just keep going. And just out of nowhere, he started playing well again. And I thought, oh no, here we go. So got to 4 apiece, and then where the 12 darter came from, I do not know. I think I hid that one in the locker from him. But once I won that game, I thought, well, that's top of the thing, and then winning it to win 2, it's an absolute amazing achievement for myself, and obviously to try and get a tour card, which has happened. So yeah.
Looking back at the weekend overall, that leg in particular, that must be one of the most important and best legs that you've thrown for a very long time, considering what that meant in terms of that order of merit.
Of course, that was probably one of the best double 13s I ever hit. Yeah, so it was, I told this to Nathan afterwards. I purposely aimed for big numbers with that. I had 81 left. Big 19, big 12. I went to aim for the big 12 and it went in treble 12, and that's probably one of the best double 13s I've ever hit. But yeah, it was. He wasn't happy for about 2 seconds after he hit that, but we had a laugh about it after. So.
Excellent. Well, as it turned out, that would be your last win of the weekend. You go out early on the first event on the Sunday, but after that event, it's confirmed that you're going to be in the top two regardless of any other results. Still an event to play, but what were the emotions like when you knew that you had a tour card?
It was weird. I was nervous up until one of my best friends, Scott Taylor. He played Keane Barry, and I was sat there hoping that Scott beat Keane Barry to guarantee a tour card, and he did. So it's ironic that one of my best friends beat the guy that gave me my tour card. So it was a relief when he beat him to know that I was guaranteed it then. So absolutely, emotions couldn't have gone high enough.
And you go out first game in the last event, and now it's a wait to see if you're going to keep top spot and that World Championship place, and it goes down to the final game with Richie Edhouse losing 5-3. You lost your game around about 5 o'clock, and it's not until just after 8 o'clock. The longest 3 hours you've ever had waiting for that?
Absolutely. I don't think I've walked as many steps in my life. Constantly just walking around, pacing up and down, and just trying to chill out. But it's so nerve-wracking thinking, are you going to get into the World Championships for your first time or not? So you've got to wait round. And I watched his previous game against Dave Parletti, and then I walked away after that. And I was going to watch the game that he was playing against Kevin Goetz, I think. And then I walked away. I sat next to Peter Manley and watched it on Dark Connect. I couldn't physically stand there. But when he got the 76 to win the match, I was elated, to be fair.
As I say, that result confirmed top spot and a debut at the PDC World Championship coming up in a couple of months. Not many players can say that they've played the BDO World Championship at the start of the year, and then at the end of the year they're playing in the PDC version. Where does that rank among your achievements in darts so far?
It's amazing to do both. To play in back-to-back World Championships in two different organisations, it's an amazing achievement for me, and for anybody. It is massive for me to be able to do that. Not to mention the nice little prize at the end of it. So,
well, before then, it's highly likely we're going to see you back on the Pro Tour before next year anyway, an invite to the Winter Series via the Challenge Tour, Order of Merit if any of the players drop out. You've played a couple of weekends on the Pro Tour last year. How much are you looking forward to hopefully getting those 5 events in?
I'm really looking forward to it. I believe it's been confirmed that I'm in the Winter Series anyway, because I believe Jamie Lewis isn't playing. But yeah, it's going to be really good. Hopefully, obviously, I'm going to stay indoors and just practice indoors to hopefully pass my COVID tests and things like that. So, really looking forward to playing get practice before I actually do it for real.
And those 2 weekends that you played in on the Pro Tour last year, you got a win over Gary Anderson. You played a lot of the big boys, the likes of Peter Wright, Adrian Lewis, Simon Whitlock. How much are you relishing the chance to play the world's best week in, week out next year?
Absolutely. It's been a dream of mine since I started playing darts since I was a kid, to play against the best of the best, and now I've got 2 years to do that and prove what I'm capable of. It's an absolute elation for me to be able to go up against the likes of Peter Wright again and play Michael Van Gerwen and Adrian Lewis again and Simon, because they know that I've been there and I've played them, that they know how good I am. As Adrian Lewis said the last time I played him, he said he saw I beat Gary in Dublin, but played him in Barnsley, and he said, let's see how good this kid really. And I said to him, and he just looked at me and he just went, well, he said, if you don't get a tour card in the next 2 years, I'll be surprised.
Well, you mentioned there as well, playing darts as a kid, and we've spoken before to you on this show about your early successes in darts, that World Masters 2002, a few days before you turned 13, getting to the last 16, the youngest to play in the men's event. If you told yourself back then, 18 years ago, you'd be playing on the professional circuit at the highest level now, what would have been your reaction?
I wouldn't have believed you. But no, because as a kid, I didn't think that it would be possible. Obviously, with family and things like that, they say, "Oh, get a proper job, etc." And I'd always thought that I might end up in a full-time position somewhere, a doctor or something like that. But no, it's always been an ambition to play darts. So to actually be playing against the top professionals, it is a dream come true, to be fair. But no, a 13-year-old kid was stood next to me now, he'd probably be ecstatic. He'd probably jumping up and down next to me.
Well, congratulations again on winning your tour card, and we wish you all the best with the Winter Series next month, and of course next year when you start your tour card.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Thanks again to Dave for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with some listener questions. As always, you guys getting in touch, really appreciate your support. And the first one comes from John Thompson. What pleased Burton more, Mark Walsh's Challenge Tour run or Dan Quinn being fired?
Well, I'll also add, and not just did Dan Quinn lose his job as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, but we also fired our general manager, Thomas Dimitrov, which I think I'm more happy about, because there's only so much you can do when the person in charge of bringing in the players isn't doing a good job bringing in the players. That said, the change needed to be made. Both changes needed to be made. And to find out as I was getting into bed Sunday night, after playing darts for the first time in 7 months, that the change had been made was fantastic. But it wasn't as fantastic as Mark Walsh's run to the semifinals. Because if you look over the last couple of years, what has kept Mark Walsh from winning Challenge Tour events? Well, last year it was Jesus on Sunday. You don't want to mess with Jesus on Sunday, defeating Mark Walsh in the final. And on Saturday in the semifinals, he happened to run in to a Williams during the Roland Garros ladies singles final. Mark Walsh might be the greatest of all time, but I don't want to be going against a Williams during a major tennis ladies singles final. Okay, it wasn't Venus or Serena, but even still, it takes a lot to defeat Mark Walsh, whether it's Williams, whether it's Jesus. I will be okay with his semifinal run because he showed that he still is the greatest of all time.
What an answer, and it was a nice surprise to see Mark Walsh's name come up on the Challenge Tour again, and like a phoenix from the ashes, getting that run to the semi-finals on the Saturday, and very close to seeing yourself, as we mentioned at the top of the show, get back on Twitter if he would have won that title. But fingers crossed we're going to get him on the show one day to have a chat with you. But what pleased me more than those two things, got to give a shout out to Dave Parletti getting to the semi-finals on Sunday. Great run for him.
Best run so far on the Challenge Tour in his first year over in the PDC. Now, second question comes from Juanita McDade. Do you think COVID has exposed just how unpredictable the season has been, with some players rising to the top, others floundering, obviously, as well, players having to withdraw from events?
I think it's definitely a factor. And as we spoke about on the show already today, we heard from Peter Wright earlier, he's pulled out of the next two European Tour events, pulled out of that defence of the World Cup, and it's probably come off the back of what we've seen, the positive test last week before the World Grand Prix started with Adrian Lewis and Stephen Bunting. And these aren't normal times like we're used to. There are strange times that we're living in at the moment, and I think it's something that is in the back of the players' minds, especially after last week. That's very fortunate since the PDC got going again that we've not had any positive tests during these events. Now we've had some. I think it's just made the players a little bit more wary about how they're going about things, and they've got to make sure that they're as safe as possible and put their careers first, if you like. But yeah, I think you can look at what we've seen over the last 6-7 months. Dirk Vendaivamboda winning the world match play 100-1 shot, 200-1, getting to the final of the World Grand Prix. And we've said it before, we've had dominant reigns in this sport. Phil Taylor for a lot of years, Michael Van Gerwen for the last 7 or 8 years, but the field are catching up, and Michael Van Gerwen's dominance is not what it used to be. And there's a lot of good players coming through at the moment, players that we maybe didn't expect to get to these finals, win these titles. They're starting to challenge. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting time for darts, and maybe COVID has helped a little bit. It's made it a little bit more unpredictable, but I think we probably would have seen some more unpredictable things happen this year. Maybe not as many, but I think it's certainly helped for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think it's been COVID that's been the main cause of it. I think Michael Van Gerwen his level has been dropping for a few years now, and it's unclear what is causing it, but it's definitely accelerating, and he's never been as vulnerable as he is right now, not just in terms of his ranking, but also in terms of just his overall performances. And I think that probably would have continued anyway. Playing these events in front of closed doors might have an impact, and that could have just made that little bit of a difference for Dirk Vendaivamboda. It might have made that little bit of difference for some other players who have gone on runs recently and started to get those breakthrough performances. But I just don't think it's been COVID. I think it's really just the quality and depth of the field, coupled with, as you said, the fact that Michael Van Gerwen's era of dominance appears to be over. It's not that he's not still the best player, but he's not dominant like he was. We don't have that dominant player right now, like for the majority of the PDC's history. There has been first in Phil Taylor and then in Michael Van Gerwen. So I'm going to say no, I don't think it's COVID. I think it's just there isn't a dominant player right now, and the depth of the quality of players is so great.
Two more questions then. They both come from our good friend of the show, Lendl, better known as FDI on Twitter. The first of those, should Lewis and Bunting get something on their order of merit, as it wasn't their fault they couldn't compete?
I'm going to say no. whether they should receive their first round prize money, not as ranking money, but as money that they're paid, is a different question. I think there's a good argument to be made for that. But we've never had something like COVID before, but we've had players get injured. We've had players have to miss events for various reasons before, and the PDC doesn't have any protected ranking system. Whether they should create one, especially for players who cannot travel for various reasons right now, is a different question. But if there isn't that system in place, I don't see why, just because they had to withdraw on match day eve, they should be treated differently than players who haven't been able to play in the qualifying events for putting their own health in first, or other players who have suffered injuries in the past. So I'm going to say no. I think they should get their prize money for the first round, but I shouldn't count on their rankings.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I can't see it happening, and I've got to give a mention to the two alternate players that came into the field. Simon Whitlock getting to the semi-finals, Jeffrey Desvant getting to the quarter-finals. So both of them making the most of that opportunity to get in the field, with the other two players unfortunately having to pull out. And how these things play out, we've seen Whitlock gets back in, Lewis has to pull out, and that means that Whitlock's back in the top 16, Lewis is out of the top 16. And as I mentioned on a previous answer, I think now that we've seen this happen, players are going to have to be extra careful about how they're doing things, and be that pull out of events when there's more travelling involved, getting on aeroplanes, going to airports. If they decide to maybe drive to these events instead, or just pull out completely, I think we're going to see players reevaluate things for the next few months, because as we've mentioned, there's a lot of these events, the big events, they are going to be here in the UK behind closed doors. So they need to make sure that when they get here, when they get the tests, that they come out negative, and that first and foremost, they are allowed to play, because if they do test positive, that's it, they're out. And I think at the end of the day, you've got to give the PDC props for putting these events on and keeping the same amount of prize money as well. It could be very easy for them to turn around and say, well, we've got no crowd, we're going to cut the prize fund. But every credit to them, they've put these events on, they've kept to the prize money that was stipulated at the start of the year. So I don't think the players can have too many complaints when the PDC are putting on all these events, and especially this time of year when we've got so many of them coming up as well.
And then our last question, also coming from FDI, what top 16 player, excluding Gary Anderson, do you think is most in danger to miss the European Championships?
Well, we're going to have to exclude two others as well, because Simon Whitlock and Dimitri Vandenberg, they're not going to be in either of the two European Tour events coming up over the next 2 weekends. So that's three players already off the top that we can say won't be in the European Championship. And there's a few others that have got to do something over these next 2 weekends. Glenn Durant, I think he's currently in that top 32 to get in, but I think he's only on £3,000. He's going to be seeded for the next two events, which means if he doesn't win that first game, he's not going to get any money on the ranking. So he probably needs to get a win or two over the next two events to make sure. Darryl Gurney, Dave Chisnell, I think they're on £5,000 at the moment. So they're getting close to that point where they're going to be safe and in the field, but they'll probably think, yeah, I probably need to get on a decent run this weekend just to make sure. And one other player as well, and rewind 12 months ago, no, a lot's happened since then, but if you'd have said 12 months ago, Ian White is going into the final two events of a European Tour, not in the European Championship, you would have been, well, I'd have probably been kicked off the show. It's very surprising, but he's lost his first game in the first two events, not got any money on his European Tour Order of Merit, and last year 4 consecutive finals, won 2 consecutive events in that run of 4 events. He needs to go on a decent run this weekend or next weekend as well.
Yeah, and took the names right off what I was going to say. Ian White, with those 2 second-round exits, hasn't received any ranking money. You know, he's definitely regressed from last year. He's not the player he was looking like 12 months ago when we really thought his major breakthrough was around the corner, because he was playing so well on the European Tour. Obviously, has been a staple at the back end of Players' Championship events for the better part of a decade, but really was getting that stage game together and finally had that breakthrough, making a semifinal. But he's not kicked on at all this year and has it all to do over the last 2 European Tour events. We'll probably need to win a match with both of them to get in, or have a big run at one of them. That said, he is obviously quality enough to do so. Beyond that, yeah, I think you have to say he's the one he's the most likely to miss. But I'll throw in one other player who's just outside the top 16, because he was in the top 16 before having to withdraw from the World Grand Prix, Adrian Lewis. He'll be seeded for these next 2, but he didn't play the first one. He lost his first match at the second one. He'll be seeded if he's healthy for these two, and they will be very important for him. It could just be enough for him to get back in the top 16 if he has a good run at one of them. But if he doesn't, he's missing out on this event, and his ranking might start to a bit of a hit going forward. Anything else for this week?
A few things. As always, we put out a tweet at the weekends when there's an event, who's going to win the title and what the scoreline is going to be, that sort of thing. We'll give you a shout out, and there are 3 of our listeners we've got to give a shout out to. FDI was correct with 5-2 to Gerwyn Price. Dom Guido as well, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, he got 5-2 Price as well. Morgs as well going with 5-2 to the Iceman, so congratulations to all them. There's your shout out. Thanks to Dave Allen at the PDC for his help with setting us up with the chats with Gerwyn and Peter on the show. Really appreciate his help with that. We're hopefully going to be back later this week with a quick recap and review of the Premier League playoffs, looking back at how that all went and how our picks got on and who won out of us between the battle of the co-hosts in our Premier League Prediction League. Hopefully I've retained my crown from last year, and we should be back next week as well. Not quite sure if you're going to be here, Burton, but if you're not, we're going to have a guest co-host to recap the European Tour and of course the Women's Series as well.
Yes, indeed, and also throw out a shout out to me. I didn't necessarily get the score right because I didn't tweet my pick, but I did before the event started say Gerwyn Price would win the title. So I think that's worth a self shout out, if I can say so modestly myself. But thanks for all of our listeners. Thanks to everyone who sent in questions. Thanks to everyone who has sent in picks. Thanks to our sponsors. We will be back, as Alex said, to do a Premier League post-final recap. I think we did one of those our very first year when Peter Wright missed all those darts to win it. We'll try to do another one this time. We'll be back next week. I may not be, but I will be back the following week. You'll just have to hang tight until then.